Greetings, this is Doc Ock coming at you live and direct today from Black Facts Headquarters Central. How's everybody doing this new day? Hope you're all doing fine as wine in the summertime. Proverb for today is, if a man comes, a quarrel comes. That's from Ethiopia. If a man comes, a quarrel comes. Now, the point for today just speaks to some things we had talked about before about North Africa and how some people seem to think that North Africa is separate from the rest of Africa, like they're two different worlds. That's like saying that California is not part of the USA. Nobody's coming with that argument, I don't think, not today. We used to be black, but now we're colored. It seems I remember being colored before. The only thing I want to know is what color were we then and what color are we now? We used to be black. I like someone to explain to me how our blackness is not a fact. Did some evolutionary revolution happen when we weren't looking? Or has someone just cooked up a scheme to turn back our clock? Is this how we make America greater? By making us lesser? We used to be black. So what are we now? Have we turned some shade of chartreuse? Or has someone just turned loose an idea that's past its time, except here in this rhyme? We used to be black. Now it seems that's a crime. Black lives should matter, but do they? It seems the answer is not much. We used to be black. Now our hair is green while our skin's tattooed blue. And our eyes are bloodshot red from wondering what else can we do to be just like you. Something to think about. We used to be black by Doc Ock. All right, the story for today is General Hamilcar Barca, Part 2. So hopefully we'll be able to finish up General Hamilcar Barca today so we can get on to Hannibal early next week. And we got 2 counts to deal with him on. So it's like a transition from transportation or adventuring on foot and adventuring over the oceans or by other means. Carthage invested General Hamilcar with full power to negotiate a peace treaty with Rome. In the role of a statesman, he demonstrated the same astuteness as he had when a general in battle. Morris has stated that Hamilcar, however, did his country a most important service at this grave conjuncture. There is no more distinctive mark of a true statesman than to be able to negotiate in adverse fortune, to measure accurately the enemy's strength, to know what resources are still at hand, to perceive, to insist on, and what to yield. End quote. General Hamilcar, in his negotiations with his counterpart, General Lutatius, maintained the integrity and independence of Carthage as a government. The 2 generals agreed on a treaty, which stated in part that the Carthaginians were to evacuate the whole of Sicily and not to make war on the Syracusans, to give up all Roman prisoners without ransom, and to pay the Romans by installments 2,200 talents in 20 years. When these terms were submitted to the Roman Senate, it did not accept the treaty, but instead sent 10 Roman envoys to Sicily to examine the matter. They modified the treaty to Carthage's disadvantage by adding 1,000 talents, so a total of 3,200 talents, and reducing the term of payment to 10 years instead of 20 years, and demanded that the Carthaginians evacuate all of the islands between Sicily and Italy. This treaty brought to an end a war that had lasted for 24 years without interruption, a war bitterly fought by two nations for the possession of Sicily. Finally, a war that had made famous the name Hamilcar Barca, the father of Hannibal. The final terms of the treaty as signed by Hamilcar for Carthage made a bitter pill for him to swallow. He had been an unvanquished general in the field, having bettered the Roman land forces at every turn. He secretly vowed to make peace in order to fight again. It is said that the general was a little more than 30 years of age. If so, he had plenty of time to prepare for the Second Punic War. However, another conflict intervened and his military ability was again needed, this time to save his own country, Carthage, from the mercenaries. When Hamilcar had completed the treaty negotiations, he resigned his command and instructed his commandant Gesco to dispatch the back to Africa. The mercenary troops were to be paid upon their arrival in Carthage, but due to the depleted treasury and to a mistaken belief of the Carthaginians that the mercenaries would not demand all of their back pay at once, the government made promises but did not pay. You know, that's always bad juju. It must be remembered that the mercenary troops were of many races: Gauls, which are French, Iberians, which are Spanish, Numidians and Libyans who are Africans, and some Carthaginians who were also of African ancestry, as was their Hamilcar Barca. The mercenary forces were led by a companion called Spendius and an African from Libya called Matho. These two men were appointed generals to lead the mercenaries in their fight against Carthage. Carthage had previously depended on the resources and revenues from Libya. It also depended on the Libyans for its army. But Matho, the Libyan, sent envoys to Libyan cities soliciting their support. The Libyans agreed to join the revolt, and the Carthaginians were deprived of all their resources at one blow. The Carthaginians appointed General Hannibal to prosecute the war against the mercenaries. Due to Hannibal's negligence and lack of military judgment, he failed to capitalize on several opportunities presented by the enemy. Consequently, he was decisively beaten in two battles. The fall of Carthage was imminent. The Carthaginians, seeing that Hannibal was unable to provide competent leadership in this conflict, again called upon the one man that could save them. They appointed the great illustrious General Hamilcar Barca. Hamilcar, who had to share his command with Anno, was dispatched immediately to the war zone. The general and his expedition on the field struck terror in the enemy by the unexpectedness of his attacks. He defeated the enemy at Utica, causing a prolonged siege to be lifted. Hamilcar drove the enemy away from Carthage and in the process completely demoralized them. He showed by his exploits and victories over the enemy what a great general he was, which made him worthy of the praise of his countrymen. The government relieved Anno of his official duties, leaving Hamilcar in full command of the army. In one campaign, Hamilcar had advanced his forces across the river and engaged the enemy on the plains of Libya. When Hamilcar saw the enemy attacking his forces, he ordered the front line, which included the elephants and cavalry, to about face and retire to the rear as quickly as possible. He then ordered those in the rear to deploy themselves on the right and left flanks to wait in ambush for the enemy. The mercenaries, thinking that the Carthaginians were afraid of them and were hastily retreating, broke ranks and chased them, whereupon the Carthaginian cavalry suddenly turned about, and at the same time, the rest of the army in ambush attacked the enemy. This surprising counterattack and ambush caused the enemy to beat a panic-stricken retreat, which soon became a rout. After this victory, Hamilcar continued to win other victories by assaulting some towns and winning over others. Hamilcar, the great military strategist, through his successive victories, restored confidence and the desire to win in his countrymen who had been despondent over their previous losses under Anno's leadership. Later, Hamilcar established his camp on a plain surrounded by mountains. Meanwhile, the enemy had made new appeals to Libya and Numidia for more troops and support. When the enemy's troop reinforcements arrived, they proceeded to surround the Carthaginians. There were Libyans on their front, Numidians at their rear, and Spendius, the enemy general, was on their flank. Hamilcar's army was in a perilous position from which it would be difficult to fight. At this point in time, Narvaez, a Numidian prince whose family had close ties with the Carthaginians and who was a great admirer of General Hamilcar, decided to seize the opportunity to meet the great man of African ancestry. With 100 Numidian escorts, Narvaez rode up to the camp and made signals to those within. Hamilcar, surprised and amazed at the young man's fearless attitude, sent a horseman to meet him. Narvaez left his horse, armament with an attendant, and boldly entered the Carthaginian camp unarmed. He related to Hamilcar the story of his family's traditional attachment to Carthage. This could mean political, social, and economic attachment, and that he, Narvaez, liked Carthage. The young African prince also told Hamilcar that he greatly admired him and was desirous of becoming his friend. He then offered the Carthaginians military assistance in support of their cause. The general was deeply impressed with the young man's courage and his honest and sincere desire to establish friendship with him and fight at his side. Hamilcar not only consented to allow Narvaez to fight for Carthage, but swore to give his daughter in marriage if Narvaez remained loyal to Carthage. The military alliance having been agreed upon, Narvaez brought in 2,000 Numidians under his command. Hamilcar, now reinforced with new troops, engaged the enemy in a stubborn battle that ended in victory for him. In this battle, Narvaez rendered outstanding and brilliant services. The alliance between Hamilcar and Narvaez was probably established on several important matters they had in common. They were both from ruling families of their respective countries. Hamilcar was head of the Barca's family, which was part of the oligarchy that ruled Carthage, and Narvaez was a prince who had a family that helped to govern Numidia in recognition of mutual interest. Both men realized that in order to save their family fortunes, they had to put down the rebellion of the Libyan and Numidian mercenaries. Another interesting and important thing these men had in common was race. They were both black men of African descent. This racial oneness was apparent when the two men first met. Narvaez had always admired Hamilcar, and when he met him, he expressed a desire to become the general's friend and offered him military assistance. Hamilcar admired the young man's courage, obviously because he identified with him. Hamilcar, in turn, offered Narvaez his daughter's hand in marriage if he remained loyal to Carthage. This gesture on the part of Hamilcar follows reasonably from what has been said about their areas of agreement and general attitudes toward each other. From the conclusions drawn about their oligarchies of Carthage and Numidia establishing an alliance to protect their interests against the class uprising, and also from the conclusion about racial similarities between the two men, Hamilcar and Narvaez continued to fight together, harassing the enemy, intercepting his supplies, and besieging his positions. The senators of Carthage felt that another commander was needed in the field with Hamilcar, so they held a conference with Anno and Hamilcar and begged them to put aside their differences for the good of Carthage. They agreed not to quarrel again and promised to bring about a complete victory for Carthage. Hamilcar and Anno, with the assistance of Narvaez, besieged one town after another until they had completely conquered all of Libya and brought the mercenary war to a successful end. The war had lasted for 3 years and 4 months. In the last year of the rebellion, while Carthage was busy fighting for its existence, the Romans were being invited by the mercenaries in Sardinia, who also wanted to revolt and challenge Carthage's authority, to send an expedition to that island. The Romans, desiring to expand their empire, accepted the invitation. When Carthage received the news that the Romans were in Sardinia, it objected on the grounds that Sardinia's sovereignty was its own, not Rome's. The Carthaginians began punishing the mercenaries that caused the revolt and prepared a force to go and put down the rebellion. Rome, alleging that Carthage was not preparing for a war against the mercenaries in Sardinia, but against Rome itself, made this a pretext for declaring war on Carthage. The Carthaginians had just barely won their truceless war against the mercenaries and were in no position to fight another at that time. In order to avoid going to war with Rome, Carthage gave up Sardinia and agreed to pay a further sum of 1,200 talents to the Romans. Carthage had now lost 2 of its important territories to Rome, Sicily and Sardinia. General Hamilcar was indignant for having had to sue for peace in Sicily because of a defeat at sea, although his army remained unvanquished in the First Punic War. This was the first important event that caused Hamilcar to have contempt for the Romans. The second important event, when the Romans literally took Sardinia from Carthage, aroused in Hamilcar a personal, undying hatred of Rome. Many historians, including Polybius, believed that the emotional hatred that Hamilcar felt against the Romans was one of the main factors that caused him to decide to prepare for the Second Punic War. Cottrell agrees with Polybius on the human factor cause, but also points out Marxist historians attribute all great historic events to economic causes. They might, with justice, cite the trade rivalry between Rome and Carthage as an illustration of this thesis. Yet, human emotions remain the dominant factor. Certainly, a composite of all these causes played a part in Hamilcar's secret plans of the future to prepare for a Second Punic War. After Carthage had ceded Sardinia to Rome, the citizens of Carthage, led by a war party of nobles, started a popular movement and elected Hamilcar leader of all the land and sea forces of the Commonwealth. He was made dictator with supreme authority. In 238 BCE, Hamilcar left for Spain with his lion's brood, Hannibal, who was 9 years old, and his 2 younger brothers, Hasdrubal and Mago. When he arrived in Spain, he set out immediately to expand the Carthaginian Empire through the establishment of trade centers for Carthage. He accomplished this by the use of armed force when required and by diplomacy. Howe said of Hamilcar's efforts to gain time for the conquest of Spain, he must allay the suspicions of his enemies abroad and at home. To the Rome and Punic senates, he must pretend that he sought in Spain compensation for the lost revenues of Sicily and Sardinia and the means of paying indemnity to Rome. End quote. In keeping with his secret plan to prepare for a Second Punic War, he built a great army from the thousands of Iberians and Gauls that joined him. The powerful Numidian horsemen left their plains to follow him, to follow the black leader they loved. Hamilcar trained and disciplined these men into a formidable fighting force. He also constructed warships from the Spanish forest to rebuild the navy that had been destroyed by the Romans in the First Punic War. General Hamilcar finally met his death on the battlefield. He died bravely in a battle against a powerful tribe after freely exposing himself to danger. The elder Cato, a deadly enemy of Carthage, is known to have exclaimed after a journey through Spain that, quote, no king was the peer of Hamilcar Barca, end quote. Morris, the writer, said the illustrious soldier and statesman died a warrior's death, but he died in full fruition of hope, and he bequeathed his task to a son-in-law, Hasdrubal, who worthily trod in his heroic footsteps, end quote. The legacy that Hamilcar bequeathed to Hasdrubal was his intense hatred of Rome and his secret plans to conquer Rome in a second Punic War. Livy said that had Hamilcar lived longer, he would have invaded Italy. The actual invasion of Rome and the beginning of the Second Punic War was eventually accomplished by a member of the Lion's Brood, Black Hannibal, Hamilcar's oldest son, who had adopted his father's intense hatred of Rome. So, after death, Hamilcar, the great general, brought about death and destruction of the Roman people through Hannibal in the Second Punic War. Such were the well-laid plans of a great black general that preserved the independence of Carthage and expanded its empire during his illustrious life. So goes the story of Hamilcar Barca. I don't know, sometimes he says Barca, sometimes he says Barcus. I'm not sure why he goes back and forth like that. So either way, we're talking about the father of Hannibal. That part is agreed upon. Okay. And so the story continues next week on Monday. We will continue the story tomorrow. Look out for our weekly rewind. We'll be doing a weekly rewind tomorrow. It'll be a regular rewind. We're not going to show do a special watch party or anything like that. Let's see. Any other notifications? Nope. That's about it as far as I can think of. Keep in mind, we are in the midst of our fall fundraising campaign. We call it 2020. And all we're looking for is a little money between now and 10/20/2020. Actually, we're looking for 20,000, but we don't need you to pay it all. Just a portion would be fine. 100, 200, 500, whatever you have to spare. So if you're looking to support us, look down below and you'll find right there the link. Click the link and that'll take you to the page where you can make your donation right here on Facebook. If you're looking to make a donation and you're not on Facebook, you're on YouTube, go ahead and go to our website, blackfacts.org. That's BLAKFACTS.org. That's where you'll find me. And you can donate there on the donation page. In the meanwhile, we're leaving you with a smile and something to think about with the story of General Hamilcar Barca and the Carthaginians, the North Africans that here spoken of, except in the context of some kind of a history class or a context where they are made to be a Mediterranean entity. In other words, totally disconnected from the African continent, when in fact they're part and parcel of the African continent. All right, so much for that. You've had your eye-opening experience in Black History today, and we've got many more coming for you in the future. Peace out. We'll be black tonight at 9. This is Doc Ock at noon and 9, signing off. We'll see you next time with a brand new rhyme.